and welcome to the episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we've got the Razer Core X. Woohoo! I'm really excited about this. This is the new $300 external GPU from Razer. This is in addition to the Razer Core V2. They are not discontinuing that. This is kind of like a different model with different options compared to the Core V2. I'll be making a separate video comparing this to the Razer Core V2. We're going to talk about the Razer Core X. Is it worth buying? Who should even consider buying the Razer Core or just eGPUs in general? What kind of performance can you get to expect with this thing? I got it in today, but I've already done like 30, 40 benchmarks with it with 4 different laptops. Now I'm giving away an iPhone 8 Red Edition. You've got until the end of May to enter that. I'll be picking the winner on June 1st. So if you want to enter that giveaway, link down below, and I'll be posting a link to whatever giveaway I'm doing currently in the top comment down below as well. Let's hop right into this review. It's gonna be freaking epic. Let's get started. So what are eGPUs? eGPU stands for External Graphics Processing Unit. This allows you to pair a super high-powered graphics card with a ultra-thin and light laptop or an outdated laptop that has an older GPU, and it allows you to easily and quickly upgrade your graphics card further on down the line. Let's say 2-3 years from now, you can just pop in a super high-end new graphics card and suddenly you're kicking ass again. eGPUs are kind of the dream in terms of price to performance ratio, at least in theory. How well do these things actually perform in practice? It can be quite a bit different depending on your setup. We've got this GeForce GTX 1080 Ti Founders Edition right here on the Razer Core X. So the specs on the Razer Core X is that it comes with a 650 watt power supply. That's going to be plenty enough power to run literally any GPU that's currently out. Other advantages of the Razer Core X is that it's going to be able to put out up to 100 watts of power out to your laptops entirely from the Thunderbolt 3 power adapter, which is really cool because then you're literally only plugging in one thing and you don't even have to worry about a power adapter at that point. Another major difference between this one and the previous versions of the Core is that this one allows you to have a 3-slotted GPU. Basically, you're going to be able to fit in extra big GPUs which have bigger heat sinks, which allow for higher turbo clocks, which is just fantastic. Another major difference is that this is only $300. This one also does not have any USB ports or LAN port on the back. It's literally just the GPU setup and that's it. So what kind of performance can you expect to get out of any graphics card that you put in here? When you're running the Firestrike benchmark, you're utilizing 90 to 100% of the power of the GPU, and that's fantastic. That's the ideal situation. With a full desktop setup, you're looking at around 6,800 approximate Firestrike Ultra score with this 1080 Ti. But when paired up with a laptop, you get about 5,800, so about 1,000 points less. But in actual practice, when you're using this bad boy to play The Witcher 3, PUBG, Overwatch, we only saw utilization rates of between 50 to 80%. So that means we're not tapping into the ultimate potential of this GPU. And part of that might be because we're using the Thunderbolt 3 port. Part of that might be the drivers that the game is using. And part of that might be the optimization of that game. And part of that, a large part of that, is that we're pairing laptop processors up with a desktop GPU. That means when the laptop processor is bottlenecking that game, you're going to get the same performance using this or using your internal GPU, such as a GTX 1060. There's 2 things to keep in mind when dealing with these Thunderbolt 3 external GPUs. You really want to have an external monitor because you want that data moving one way. If you hook up this external GPU to your laptop and you're playing games on the laptop screen, you have data going out to the external GPU and then coming back into the laptop, and that 2-way traffic causes a lot of bottlenecking and can severely reduce your potential performance. And number 2, your laptop needs to have ideally 4 PCIe lanes. So the Dell XPS 15 that we tested with this did not. It actually only had 2 PCIe lanes, and it still worked. It worked quite well with Fortnite, but we had some issues running Overwatch on it. Ideally, at least 4 PCIe lanes, because that'll give you the most potential throughput and the maximum performance. Now, I was able to successfully pair the Core X with multiple laptops, including this GS65 Stealth. This is the brand new MSI gaming laptop that's a 15.6 inch, weighs 4.1 pounds, extremely thin and light, has a 6-core processor, and has a 1070 Max Q GPU in it. This is 0.7 inches thin and only 4.1 pounds. I'll have a link to this laptop if you want to check it out. down below. Another laptop we tested the Core X with was the Razer Blade Pro 17-inch. This has an i7 7700HQ processor, as well as a GTX 1060 laptop GPU. Then we have the Dell XPS 15 that has an i7 7700HQ, and it has a GTX 1050 graphics card. And then you have the Razer Blade Stealth that has the 8550U with an Intel 620 GPU that's integrated with the processor, and that is a significant downgrade from anything else that we're talking about here. We have those 4 laptops that we've tested with the Razer Core X. How does each one perform, and is it worth buying the Core X to pair up with each of them? If you have the Razer Blade Stealth or a similar Ultrabook with a Thunderbolt 3 port, this thing will turn that Ultrabook into a beastly gaming computer. You'll be able to play nearly all modern games at reasonable frame rates, if not exceptional frame rates. Now, I have compiled a whole bunch of benchmarks from the different laptops I reviewed and the external GPUs I reviewed, which includes the Razer Core V2 and the Razer Core X. Now, if you want to go check out those full list of benchmarks, I'll have a link down below. For some of the games, we saw dramatic improvements, and for some of the games, we actually saw some FPS fall off when using the Razer Core versus the internal GPU. But I'd like to bring your attention to a couple of key benchmarks. With the Razer Blade Stealth paired up with a 1080 Ti in an external GPU, on average we had 94 frames per second in PUBG. In Overwatch, we were looking at 141 frames per second. Dota 2, we managed 103. Witcher 3, we had 65 frames per second. In Rocket League, we were pumping out 165 frames per second. And in Fire-Strike Ultra, we managed to get 5968, which is actually the best score that we've managed to get out of this external GPU. With the Dell XPS 15, the internal graphics card only managed 33 frames per second in Fortnite, but with the external card, it managed 103 frames per second. That is a 3 times graphical boost, which is just freaking insane. The main downside, as I said, with the Dell XPS 15 is that it only has 2 PCIe lanes, so some of the games just aren't going to perform very well. For example, Overwatch, I managed to get 77 frames per second on its own with the GTX 1050. With the Core X, it managed to get 144 frames per second, but it was glitching out in weird ways. So I can't really recommend playing that game with that laptop setup. Now we have the Razer Blade Pro and the GS65. Now both of these laptops have ultra powerful built-in dedicated GPUs. So with my Razer Blade Pro, my default graphics card, the 1060, was repeatedly turned off and almost like essentially uninstalled. I had to keep reinstalling my graphics card driver in order to get it to work. To get it to work with the GS65 Stealth and XPS 15, all we had to do was plug it in and install the latest NVIDIA driver, and it worked perfectly, and it instantly switched between the 1080 Ti and the built-in graphics card. So here enters the issue of when we're using the built-in graphics cards, sometimes those built-in graphic cards outperform the Core X with a 1080 Ti. And that's simply because of the optimization of using a laptop with an external GPU. Depending on the game, it may or may not be worth it even using the external GPU. If, for example, we're able to use a higher percentage of the 1080 Ti's power in more games, then yes, it will absolutely become worth it to have. It's, in my opinion, not worth it having a laptop with an NVIDIA GTX 1060 and an external graphics card enclosure, unless you're an absolute max performance nut. The simple fact is, if you want a laptop with the maximum potential gaming performance, having a laptop with a GTX 1080 in it, that is going to be your best performing laptop graphics, period. Getting something like this or the new Razer Blade is going to be a far better bang for the buck than buying the Razer Blade Stealth plus an external graphics enclosure, plus buying that extra graphics card on top of that. That's going to run you around $2,200, $2,300, when instead you can get just as good or better performance with something like this or the new Razer Blade 15. So I think there are 3 major camps of people that should consider getting this Razer Core X or other eGPU enclosures. The first camp is if you're an Apple user that has like a MacBook Pro and you want to really amp up your potential graphics. The second group is people who want to buy an Ultrabook that really crave having a thin and light system like the Razer Blade Stealth. You can really get an incredible gaming experience with one of those thin and light systems using an external graphics enclosure. The third group of people is those people that bought a budget gaming computer, or they have an older gaming laptop that has a Thunderbolt 3 port on it. If you have a GTX 1050 or lower in your laptop, then you're going to see a massive performance gain with the Razer Core X. If you already have a laptop, buying something like this is only going to be $1,000 extra. Getting something like this that's actually better than this is going to cost you $2,000. So if you already have a gaming laptop that has an outdated GPU or has a lower end, weaker GPU, then this external graphics card enclosure is a pretty attractive option rather than buying a whole new laptop. So who should absolutely not buy the Razer Core X? In my opinion, if you have a GTX 1070 or a 1080, it's just not worth it. There's too many little driver things, too many inefficiencies. If they address those issues and we can utilize the GPU at a higher rate, then I think this might absolutely be worth it, even if you have a 1070 or 1080. For example, a 1080 versus a 1080 Ti, it's a 20 to 30% gap. But because of the inefficiency of the bandwidth of the Thunderbolt 3 and the laptop processor not being as high-end as a desktop processor, you're just not getting the same level of performance, especially in demanding CPU titles like Witcher 3 and PUBG. That said, if they can get the optimization there in the games and the drivers, then absolutely, it'll be totally worth it having a 1080 Ti that's overclockable, even if you have a GTX 1080 in your laptop. That's my take on the Razer Core X, and I'll have links down below if you want to pick one of these bad boys up. And also, I will link to the Razer Core V2 review that I did a little while back. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to enter the iPhone 8 Red Edition giveaway, and we'll see you next time. Brandon, out.